Coming up next on Kids TV and Me, author, illustrator, and children's television enthusiast Joshua Stauffer will be talking to you today about this.
When a manatee playfully tumbles in the water, it's a sign he's healthy again. That's when he's ready to return to the wild.
The ocean is home to many living things that need our care. But beyond the waves and beneath the surface of warm ocean waters live the creatures of the coral reefs. Beautiful fish, magnificent corals, and sponges all live beneath the waves like an underwater garden. Harold Hudson and Paige are two scientists who are helping to save the coral reefs when they are damaged by ships which come too close.
When most people dive to the coral reefs, they come to enjoy the beauty. My assistant Paige and I are here on business. We're looking for a coral that we can move or transplant to another location where the natural beauty has been damaged or destroyed.
Hello everybody! Joshua Stauffer here, finally back with another episode of Kids TV and Me. In case you haven't noticed, I have not posted anything for an entire month. I took May 2026 off, and there's a number of reasons for that. The main reason being, I went on not one, but two vacations with my family. First, we went to the Outer Banks at the beginning of May, and then the following weekend, we went up to a log cabin in the mountains of northern Pennsylvania. I had a good time with both of those trips, but as a result, I was not able to find the time to record the May podcasts in time, so I decided to push everything ahead by 1 month. So everything that I said I was going to do in May, you're now going to hear it in June 2026. Now this is the first week of June, assuming that I posted this on time, and that means we're going to do an episode of Reading Rainbow today. However, this will be my last Reading Rainbow analysis until September. Let me tell you why. This summer I'm going to try to scale back on the podcast a little bit to save up some time to work on illustrations for my next children's book. It's a sequel to Meet Zoe Richards called Zoe's Friends. I'm the author and illustrator of that book, and I've been working on it for a long time, and I'm looking forward to getting that finished and sharing it with you guys. It'll be quite a while before I'm done with the illustrations because it's a very big book, and there's a lot of artwork I want to put into it. So what I'm thinking of doing, and I actually might have posted this already, if I remembered to, starting this summer and continuing for the next however many months, I'm going to post chapters of my new book, Zoe's Friends, weekly on my Substack page at joshuastauffer1.substack.com. So you guys can enjoy like a text-only version before I illustrate it. You can let me know your thoughts and tell me if you like it or not. But anyway, I will not be doing any Reading Rainbow analysis during the months of July or August, because I'll be cutting the podcast in half. I'll only be doing 2 episodes per month instead of 4 or 5. I am planning to continue analyzing Kipper all summer long because you guys seem to be enjoying that a lot. I'm also going to skip Frog and Toad. You'll get Frog and Toad this month in June, but there'll be no Frog and Toad in July or August either. Harriet the Spy, no Harriet in July, but I will do one at the end of August. So what I'm planning to do is this month I'll do all of my 4 main series in June. In July, I'm going to do 2 half hours of Kipper the Dog, 2 sets of 3 stories, 6 altogether. So in other words, it'll be a week of Kipper, and then 2 weeks later I'll do another Kipper, and then 2 weeks later at the beginning of August I'll do yet another Kipper. After that, at the end of August, I'll do the next Harriet the Spy. So yeah, I'm trying to scale back on this so I can get some other projects done, because my next book is very important to me. I hope you enjoy it. But I also enjoy doing this podcast. It's also the easiest thing for me to make, because I can talk faster than I can type. The only thing that would make the podcast more enjoyable would be if, A, more people listened to it, and B, if more people would give me some likes and comments. But speaking of comments, we did in fact get a comment about last month's Reading Rainbow analysis, Watch the Stars Come Out. This comment was on YouTube, and one of our listeners said, "This was one of my favorite books as a little girl. I would love to see the illustrations again if you decide to take a video showing the inside pages of the book. Great overview. So whoever you are, thank you very much for writing. I don't have the book with me anymore. I returned it to the library. But if I ever do a video on YouTube about my top 10 favorite episodes of Reading Rainbow, Watch the Stars Come Out is definitely one of those top 10. So I'll be sure to include some pictures on screen showing the inside of the book that were featured on the show. If I ever get to that, don't know when it'll happen, but it is something I want to do someday. So anyhow, thank you for the comments. Like I said, you can leave comments on YouTube as well as Instagram at Joshua Stauffer Creations, and my Substack page at joshuastauffer1.substack.com. Now, today, we're going to be analyzing another episode of Reading Rainbow, My Life with the Wave. How appropriate, because I just came home from the beach. This episode aired in 1998, and I watched it for the first time in 2001 when I was 3 years old. So without further ado, let's dive into this wet and wild episode of Reading Rainbow, My Life with the Wave. Here we go. So at the end of the intro, the first thing that we see are some ocean waves with the words hosted by LeVar Burton over top of them. And as soon as they disappear, we see LeVar himself, and he's very quickly running away from the water crashing into the sand. He's laughing and he says, "Whoa, that one almost got me." And it turns out that he's avoiding the waves today because it's still early springtime and the waves are still a little bit too cold. He just goes right ahead and says that and doesn't even bother saying hi there or hi like he usually does. First thing we hear is LeVar's laugh, and that's good enough for me. It's just as welcoming as him saying hello. And even though LeVar doesn't want to get his feet into the cold water, he still loves coming to the ocean's edge and watching the surf. And he says he's at Long Beach. Which Long Beach is he talking about? Because there's two of them. There's one in New York, and there's another one in California. Let me back this up a little bit. At the very beginning, I saw some buildings in the background, like up the beach a little bit. I wonder if we can find them somewhere. Let's take a look at good old Google Maps. Oh, there's also a Long Beach in New Jersey. Let's try the New York one first. Yeah, there's quite a few big apartment buildings right along the beach at Long Beach, New York, so it could have been filmed there. Let me check California and see. Yeah, Long Beach is actually a big city in California. Yeah, I don't think this episode of Reading Rainbow was filmed in California, because if it was Long Beach, California, there would be a lot more palm trees in the background. And I don't see it here, just these apartment buildings. There's no palm trees there. The reason I wasn't sure was because LeVar grew up in California, and I think he still lived there when he was doing Reading Rainbow, which means that he would have had to travel to New York whenever they did an episode there. And I guess it would have been a lot farther for the film crew to travel to California if they had did something out there, because the home base was WNED-TV in Buffalo. So Long Beach, New York City would have been a lot closer to them being the film crew. It'd been a lot cheaper to do it there and just have LeVar fly over. And also, LeVar said that the water is still a little bit cold. I can't imagine it would be very cold in LA, like in Long Beach, California. Yeah, Long Beach, California is just south of Los Angeles, not far from Torrance, Santa Monica, and Anaheim. I don't know the California towns very well. Never been out there. Yeah, I don't think it was Long Beach, New Jersey either, because that place doesn't have near as many big apartment buildings. It's mostly just regular beach houses, like the kind that I stayed at. Yeah, so I'm 99% sure that LeVar is at Long Beach, New York. He says, today at Long Beach, the waves are not too big and they're not too little either. In fact, they are just about right. But on beaches all over the world, waves can be totally different. And then we see lots of really beautiful footage of ocean waves. There's people playing in the waves and surfing on them. Wow, those are huge waves. There's some waves crashing into rocks. Another kid surfing. Really pretty music accompanying this. Want to hear some? That was lovely. And now we're back to LeVar, who says that almost everybody is fascinated by the energy of waves. the energy and rhythm of waves. But when you're a surfer, you actually get on top of a wave and ride it as best as you're able back toward the beach. And then he introduces us to some surfers. There's these two fine gentlemen here, and also a little kid with them, a little boy. And they each have their own surfboards. And there's a bunch of other guys too. And now they're all running out into the waves. And then we see lots of other footage of surfers, accompanied by some upbeat beach-style music. And right before the music abruptly cut off there, we saw that little kid riding on some small waves, and then as the music stops, the kid says, "Awesome!" Very cute. And when I was little, I couldn't help but notice that right after we see this kid, we see another guy holding his surfboard. It's a Quicksilver surfboard, and for whatever reason, it's got a picture of a baby on it. I don't know if that's supposed to be a picture of his kid that he put on there, like a sticker or something, or if it was like that when he bought it, it's just some kind of decoration. Not sure. But as a kid, I remember thinking it reminded me of the Gerber logo. Anyway, he says that there's not really anything that compares to catching a really good wave. Then the music comes back on very suddenly, and we see more footage of surfers. Surfing very well, I must say. Some really cool shots there. I've never surfed before. Then we suddenly cut to some more guys standing on the shore. One of them says, that was cold! Next guy says, fantastic! And then we see the first guy again. I think he's got a blue towel around his neck there. He says he's been surfing for about 16 years, since he was 12. Wow, 16 plus 12 is 28, right? Yeah, that means this gentleman would have been about my age when this was filmed. Interesting. Then very quickly we see another guy who says that he can't compare it to anything. And back to the surfing action once again. Do 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 do. No, your ears were not deceiving you. You did in fact just hear a dog. There was a dog surfing! That's amazing. Wonder how they got that dog to stand on that surfboard like that. He's even got a little wetsuit on. And as he's going through the waves, he shakes his head to try to get the water off. And at the end of the montage, there's a few wipeouts from some of these guys. And then we see the 5 guys from the beginning, the 4 men, the little boy, coming back onto the shore. LeVar says, how was it out there? And they said, all right, it was great. And LeVar is actually holding today's featured book, which he'll introduce in a few seconds. He says, surfers know that waves are a little bit like people. Each one has its own unique personality. And whether they're big and powerful or mellow and smooth, one thing's for certain, waves can be totally unpredictable. And he holds up the book and says, the boy in this book gets into a wave and ends up a little bit over his head. That's a great little expression there. In over his head, like it could be referring to the wave going over his head, and also the boy going over his head, like having ideas that are a little too big. And this book is called My Life with the Wave. And in case you're wondering, yes, I do have the book right here. I was able to get it at the library. And this book was based on a story by Octavio Paz. And it was translated and adapted for children by Catherine Cohen. So, does that mean that there was originally a book for adults written in a different language called My Life with a Wave? Let me look into this. Google says that the story is a deeply metaphorical, surreal allegory about the passionate but destructive nature of love. Yeah, I'm not finding much information about the original version. Octavio Paz Lozano was a Mexican philosopher, poet, and diplomat. So I guess a lot of his original books were written in Spanish if he's from Mexico. Since he was a poet, maybe it was a short story in one of these other books that he did. And I will say that My Life with a Wave is kind of a love story. It's about a boy who falls in love with a wave and brings it home. And this children's book kind of makes into more of a funny, fantastical, literal thing, whereas in the original, it was like a metaphorical representation of the kind of trouble you can get into when you fall in love with somebody, I guess. So, Catherine Cohen made the children's version of My Life with a Wave that we're going to be looking at today, and it was illustrated by Mark Buhner. And this presentation was narrated by Scott Irby Renier. Scott Irby Renier, what did he do? Because all of the Reading Rainbow narrators are some kind of celebrity, most of them are. American actor and singer. He was born in 1984, which means he would have only been 14 in 1998 when this episode was made. Makes sense because he sounds pretty young to represent the story being told in first person by this little boy. He is best known for originating the role of young Simba in the Broadway production of The Lion King in 1997. Interesting. He is a former member of the band Steel Train. And he didn't do any other movies or shows except for one episode of Law & Order in 1999, in which he played a guy named Eddie Helford. But yeah, it was just one episode of Law & Order and one episode of Reading Rainbow, that's it. And he also played Simba in The Lion King on Broadway, and he was a member of the band Steel Train. Alright, so let's hear this guy read this book, and I will compare the book presentation on the show to the hardcover library copy that's in my hand. Okay, so they got the entire first page here. The story begins with this boy falling in love with the waves. And as they were getting ready to leave, it says, "One wave tore away from the sea. When the others tried to stop her," I assume that means the other waves, "they tried to stop her by clutching at her floating skirts. The wave caught the boy's hand and they raced together across the wrinkled sand." Next we see the wave leaning on the boy's father's shoulders, begging him to let the boy take him home, or take her home, the wave being her. It's a really interesting visual, the way they've got the wave, like, it almost looks like it's solid. Like it's liquid, but it holds its shape, like it's just stand there like a person. It's not shaped like a person, but it's like it's an alive creature in this story. On the next page, they're at the train station getting ready to go home, and they were afraid that the conductor might not let the wave ride home with them on the train. And so the book says, "So, cup by small cup, when no one was looking, I emptied the water cooler and she hid herself inside it." So can this wave, like, change its size too? Because it would have to get pretty small to fit inside a water cooler, I would think. Of course, the first time I watched this when I was 3, I thought the story was saying that, like, the cup, my small cup, and I misheard the part that says when no one was looking. I thought it said, like, the wave had broken his small cup. Then it says, "When we arrived home, the wave rushed into our house." Now on the show, the part where they says, "The wave rushed into our house," the picture dissolves to the next page, and then we hear that paragraph. But in the book, that sentence is actually at the bottom of the train page, and then when you turn the page, we see 2 complete pages filling the entire open section of the book there with no text. It's all a big picture of the wave entering the house and splashing all over everything, knocking over a lamp and scaring the cat. And we see all this on the show too. In fact, we even hear a little meow from the cat. The story continues on the next page. "Before, she had been one wave. Now she was many." So I guess it can get bigger and smaller, like expand and contract. "Then she flooded our rooms with light and air, driving away the shadows with her blue and green reflections." The choice of words in this book are really amazing. Very descriptive and very unique. Okay, here's a sentence that Reading Rainbow skipped. "Small forgotten corners crowded with dust and dark were swept by her light." And then it continues, "The whole house shone with her laughter, her smile was everywhere." And in this picture we see the boy's bedroom all filled with water, like it's a big swimming pool, and the waves just sticking right up there, playing with the boy, and he's got these swim shorts on with the fruit on them. It says, "The sun came into our old dark rooms and stayed for hours and hours." And the way they drew the sun in this illustration, the sun literally is like a little glowing ball sitting on the windowsill, and it's got legs. It's dancing right there on the windowsill. "It loved dancing with the wave and me so much that sometimes I forgot to leave." And we can hear Scott laughing a little bit as he reads this. Okay, here's another skipped sentence. "More than once, it crept out through my window as the stars watched it in amazement." And I noticed there's 2 windows, like on different ends of the corner there, the one window has the sun dancing on the windowsill and it's all bright, and the other window has like nighttime and it's stars. So I guess that is to symbolize the fact that it's supposed to be nighttime, but the sun forgot to leave. And the sun is very small, probably to represent the way the sun might look small if you're just looking out the window. And the boy's imagining what it would be like if the sun was actually that size and it was right there, dancing on the window. Next page, the wave looks like a great big tree and it's raining down on the little boy. There's a rainbow coming out of it. The book says if I caught and hugged her, she would rise up tall like a liquid tree, then burst into a shower and bathe me in her foam. If I ran at her and she stood still, I would find myself wrapped in her arms. And reading Rainbow skip the last parts, it says, she would lift me up, then let me fall, only to catch me and lower me to the floor as gently as a feather. If it wasn't for the fact that all of this was happening inside the house, getting everything soaking wet, I would say this looks like a lot of fun. Like, I want to be there experiencing that. Yeah, they're really making this story feel very dreamy and romantic. This love between the boy and the wave. Next we see the boy in bed, and the wave is wearing a hat with this little neck strap thing tied to it. And for whatever reason, the sheets don't even look like they're soaking wet. It does look like the bed is floating though, because the floor is completely covered in water. The book says, at nights we lay side by side, whispering secrets with smiles and smothered laughter. She rocked me to sleep in her waters and sang sweet sea songs into the shell of my ear. Sweet sea songs, that's cool. Like ocean lullabies. Sometimes in the dark she shimmered like a rainbow. And speaking of rainbow, reading rainbow, skip the next sentence. It says, to touch her then was like touching a piece of night tattooed with fire. Now the next few sentences on this page here actually describe what's happening on the next two pages, because it's another situation where they've got two complete pages covered with artwork with no text. On the show it says, other nights she was black and bitter. And they skipped quite a bit here. The book continues, in dark despair she howled and sighed and twisted. Hearing her, the sea wind came flying over the mountains. It wailed with a wild wind voice through the trees and clawed all night at my windows. Then the show continues, cloudy days enraged the wave. She smashed my model train. We actually do see the model train being tossed around in the picture. She soaked up my stamp collection and covered my room in her gray and greenish foam. My goodness, this book, this illustration here, we can see the lightning flashing outside. We see a teddy bear being tossed around the waves too. And my goodness, his bed is like standing on end almost, the way it's being rocked all over the place. At first it looks like he's leaning on a rocking chair, but no, it's the end of his bed at an angle. Next page, she was pulled by the moon, the sun, the stars. Her moods were as changeable as the tide. The boy thought she might be lonely, so he gave her seashells and a tiny sailboat to play with. We don't see those in the picture, but on the show, we see a close-up of a robot being tossed around by the waves. That robot is actually from a few pages earlier, where the boy was in bed, and the wave was lying there with him with a hat on. But the wave smashed the seashells and the tiny sailboats against the wall, so the boy brought home a small fish for her to play with. Oh, not just a fish, it was multiple small fish. I see that now. I always thought they showed the same fish from different angles there, but there's at least 3 or 4 of them. Little goldfish. The wave played with the fish by the hour. And according to the book, also not heard on the show, at night while she slept, the fish adorned her hair with little flashes and splashes of color. Next page, the show continues. Finally, I grew angry. Now the waves spent all the time playing with the fish and never played with me. I tried to catch them, but they darted like ghosts between my fingers, while the wave poured over me in foaming laughter. And we see the boy's face there like, ah! And the wave's just about to crash over top of him as he's trying to catch the little fish. And I noticed on different pages he's got a different swimsuit on. This one's got animals on it. There's a lizard and an elephant and a few other things too. He doesn't wear a swimsuit on every page though. The storm scene with the lightning outside, and that one he was in his pajamas. And once again, folks, we have a lot of text here telling us what happens in the next 2 fully illustrated pages. Very creepy looking ones, I must say. And they did something kind of unusual here. They took 2 sentences and kind of spliced them together into one. On Reading Rainbow, it says, with the coming of winter, the wave had nightmares. But in the book it says, with the coming of winter, the sky turned gray and the city shivered, drenched in a frozen rain, period. And then, the wave had nightmares, period. And then in the book it continues, she dreamed strange dreams of the icy regions of the poles, of turning to ice and sailing away to where the nights go on for years. She curled herself into a corner and howled through long, long days and longer nights. Then the show continues, right after the wave had nightmares. She filled the house with phantoms and called up monsters from the deep. Yikes. So, what the heck does that mean? Filled the house with phantoms and called up monsters from the deep? Did she, the wave, bring all these monsters and demons into the house? I mean, I'm seeing all these crazy things here with, like, glowing eyes, and there's this weird tornado-looking thing with a mouth on the end, and swirly eyes and glasses. When I was little, I always thought that the wave was having a nightmare about being eaten by this giant fish that we see in the middle of the picture here. Dang, there's bats and everything. Fortunately, on the show, we only see this stuff for about 5 or 6 seconds, but in the book, like, this is a massive 2-page picture here with all kinds of creepy things, so let's move along ahead from that now. It says, my father said she would have to go. Whoa, they completely changed this part here. I didn't know Reading Rainbow could do that. They, like, changed one of the sentences in the book. Unless the way the book was written was changed later, and this copy came out after the show. I don't know. But in this copy that I have here, it says, my poor mother was nearly crazy. But on the show, it says, the wave was making us all crazy. The rest of this page is the same, though. Since I could never catch the wave, we packed and went away for a time, leaving her behind in the cold. So I guess these guys had to get out of the house and get away from the scary wave. Then when they got back from their trip, they found the wave frozen, a beautiful statue of ice. The boy says, though it broke my heart, I helped my father wrap her in a quilt, and we carried her back to the sea. Wow. They're literally dragging this quilt through the sand the way it's wrapped up in this frozen wave. I'd hate to have to wash all the sand out of that quilt after a project like that. Oh, I remember this next page here. This second to last one. The one with the boy in the bathtub. The first thing we see on the show are these 2 handles for the hot and cold water for the bathtub. And right underneath it is, like, the tap or the spigot. I always thought the knobs for the hot and cold water looks like toilet flush handles. And the spigot beneath looks like a silver version of the Shell logo. Also looks a little bit like the logo for the New Holland Agricultural Machine Company. I always thought those 2 logos looked pretty similar, the Shell and New Holland. So anyway, the book concludes, now the house is dark again, and the corners are filled with dust and shadows. Sometimes I lie awake at night and remember. The show just says, sometimes I remember, though. They skip the I lie awake at nights and thing. My parents say, good riddance to bad waves, and I am never to bring home another. But I miss my friend. The music sounds a little bit sad when the boy says all this. It's just very quiet and mellow. Then the music sounds slightly more cheerful as we enter the final paragraph. Maybe next year, if we go to the mountains, I'll bring home a cloud. Clouds are soft and cuddly, and would never act like a wave. The picture on the show pans up to the window, and outside we see a cloud that looks like it's smiling. And so the boy thinks that it might be a good idea to bring a cloud home next year from the mountains. But then at the very final page after that, there's another picture with no text, and the cloud's still smiling, but his eyes look very suspicious, and we see some lightning coming out from the bottom of him. So you think that clouds would never act like a wave, huh? You might want to think again, kid. Because clouds can be pretty mean sometimes. They can make rain and snow and hurricanes and tornadoes. Don't let their soft and cuddly appearance on calm days fool you. As we see the lightning in that final picture and hear a rumble of thunder, the words "the end" appear on the screen. And then we fade to black and then fade back to the real beach where LeVar is looking at the book and closing it with a laugh, as he commonly did this season. This is just like when Aunt Leah did the rumba. At the end of that story, we saw LeVar closing the book when he finished. One thing I also want to mention before we continue, the background music that they used for My Life with the Wave was reused again later in the episode Our Big Home and Earth Poem in 2002. Oh, here we go. I'm looking at the copyright stuff in the book here. It says, this story is based on My Life with the Wave, included in Eagle or Sun, published by New Directions Publishing Corporation, used by permission. Copyright 1960 by Fondo di Cultura Economica. So, Eagle or Sun was the book that this originally came in. Eagle or Sun by Octavio Paz. The first major book of short prose poetry in Spanish, exerted an enormous influence on modern Latin American writing. Okay then. Paz himself explains Eagle or Sun is an exploration of Mexico, yes, but at the same time and above all, it's an exploration of the relations between language and the poet, reality and language, the poet and history. And I'm reading this from New Directions Books. So that's where it came from. Eagle or Sun was the original book that featured the poem My Life with the Wave, which is now a children's book featured on Reading Rainbow. So anyway, LeVar just finished reading this hysterical book, and he says, I guess some things are best left where they belong. Waves belong in the ocean, not in the living room. And he says, but it's still really fun to imagine what it might be like to bring home something totally outrageous. And then he asks the viewers, what would you bring home that is absolutely crazy? Now, in this kind of situation where LeVar asks a question and then a bunch of kids answer it, he often starts the question by saying, how about you? But he didn't this time. So let's see what these children have to say. So this first kid is having a little trouble deciding, and he thinks he would either bring home a giraffe or a roller coaster. Now this How About You segment is pretty unique because with each of these 3 interviews, there's only 3 of them, we actually see some footage accompanying their thoughts. So this kid's thinking about roller coasters, and we do in fact see some footage of one of the roller coasters at Six Flags Great Adventure amusement park in New Jersey. This is actually recycled footage from the episode Archibald Frisbee, in which LeVar himself actually rode on that roller coaster, and then showed us how it worked. I remember the first time I saw Archibald Frisbee, I looked at that and thought, oh yeah, it's the roller coaster from My Life with the Wave, because I saw this episode first and then Archibald Frisbee later. Let's see, what was the name of this roller coaster? It's the red, white, and blue one. Yeah, that's gotta be it right there, the Great American Scream Machine. The one with the red tracks and the white cars with the blue and red along the sides and the stars. It's not there anymore. The Great American Scream Machine was around from 89 until 2010. But it was definitely there in the 90s, and Reading Rainbow got to experience that. And as we see all this footage, the kid's talking about how much he would enjoy going fast on a roller coaster, and he thinks that maybe if he had some ice cream and some milk, he could go on the roller coaster, and after the ride, he'd have a milkshake. I don't know if that would really work or not. I also couldn't help but notice that this is a different roller coaster than what they showed in My America, because that roller coaster was from Camp Snoopy at Mall of America. That was the segment when they were talking about Minnesota. I'm still hoping I could be able to go up there sometime. Maybe this year, maybe a different year, we'll see. Okay, now we have another little boy here, and he says that if he could take home anything in the world, it would be a cloud. Now this footage here is also recycled from a different episode. It's from Come a Tide, which was about weather. That episode began with LeVar looking up at the sky and seeing all the shapes in the clouds. Then he continues to talk about storms and stuff. And isn't it funny? This kid was thinking the exact same thing that the kid from the book was thinking. At the end of My Life with the Wave, the boy was thinking, maybe next year if we go to the mountains, I'll bring home a cloud. That's exactly what this other kid wants too. And he's not really thinking of the possibility of storms either. He's thinking about how they're soft and fluffy, and if he wants to go someplace, he could just sit on the cloud and fly on it. He also imagines playing hide and seek with the clouds by just hiding inside of them. And as he's saying this, we see a picture of one of the clouds in the background and a little tiny picture-in-picture thing with the boy's face, and they kind of slowly move it in towards the cloud and fade away as if he's really going in there to hide. That's cool. And he even tells us this elaborate idea of a game he could play with the cloud where he lies in his bed and looks up at the cloud on the ceiling. Boy, doesn't that sound familiar. I wonder if this is that same kid from that book. Because the wave was in the boy's bedroom too. He's probably imagining the cloud being in his room as well. And he So he's thinking about a game where he can guess how many cloud formations the cloud's trying to do, like what kind of shapes they are. And he says he could invite his friends over, and whoever guesses the most shapes of the cloud wins. And finally, we have a little girl who says that if she can bring home something totally outrageous, it would be an elephant. And yes, we do have some elephant footage here, but I have no idea which episode this came from, if any at all, if they just picked up some random elephant stock footage and put it in for this episode, or if they had already filmed this ahead of time for a previous show. I don't remember seeing this elephant before on Reading Rainbow. If any of you guys remember which episode the elephant was from, if any at all, please let me know in the comments. And so the girl describes how big elephants are, and they got these floppy ears and a long trunk, and she's thinking about how the elephant could spray water with its trunk and like be a sprinkler for her. And then we see this guy cleaning the elephant's toenails with something. Like it's some kind of hard object that he's using to dig dirt out from between the elephant's toes. And as we see this, the girl's talking about the possibility of giving an elephant a manicure and painting the elephant's giant toes with nail polish. And then we transition back to the beach. The picture kind of swooshes away. And we see LeVar laughing again. Great ideas, he says. And then he says, but in real life, we humans actually care for some really spectacular and amazing creatures, especially those who have gotten into trouble. And now we see a manatee. LeVar says that these friendly manatees are way too big to fit into the bathtub and wouldn't be very happy on the couch, because he's still thinking about My Life with a Wave. And then he introduces us to a park ranger named Betsy and a veterinarian named Mark, who are taking care of manatees in the quiet waters of Homosassa Springs. Homosassa Springs is in Florida, and they have a state park there. And LeVar looks a little bit younger there. So this is definitely not filmed the same year that the rest of this episode was shot. This is, in fact, another recycled segment from the episode Sam the Sea Cow. That episode was all about manatees and saving them as an endangered species. And a great deal of that episode shows LeVar helping these guys rescue manatees. And we see a few minutes of that right here in My Life with a Wave. So these are injured manatees that they're looking at here. And they have scars from being hit by boats. They got scratched up by boat propellers. And there's a dish floating on the water with some food on it, and they're going to feed the manatees. They have some monkey biscuits, which are vitamin mineral biscuits. And so she takes one of these biscuits and puts her hand under the water, and the manatee just eats it under the water there. And they also have lettuce, cabbage, and carrots, because the manatees are vegetarians. And they say that the manatees eat hyacinths and hydrilla grass that grows along the river. They say the manatees spend most of their day eating, sleeping, and playing, and LeVar says that's not a very bad way to live. Eat, sleep, and play all day. And the scientist believes that the manatee might be a descendant of the elephant because their toes look similar to elephants' toes. It's funny, we were just talking about elephants a minute ago. Now, I personally don't believe in the whole evolution thing, but I do see some similarities between the manatees and elephants, because they also mentioned that a manatee's face is kind of like an elephant's trunk, the way they kind of use the end of their face to reach out and grab food, similar to the way an elephant's trunk does. And as they look at the manatee's skin, they notice that there's a very small amount of body hair, which means that the manatee is in fact a mammal. If you've seen the episode Sam the Sea Cow, you probably already know that, because the sea cow obviously makes milk. And then we see that their nostrils have valves that open and close, almost like eyelids. I remember when I was a kid, I looked at that and I saw the nostrils closing. I thought that was its eyes closing, but no, it was the nose. It's another thing that makes it a mammal. They have to hold their breath underwater and then come up to the surface to breathe. Now, the music in this segment was not used in Sam the Sea Cow. I believe they added this for the My Life with the Wave version. Then we see some shots of manatees swimming and moving their tails similar to a beaver tail. And they talk about how manatees are an endangered species, and there were only like 14,000 some in Florida at the time that this was filmed. And finally, LeVar comments on how even though manatees are like very large animals, they're very gentle and friendly. And the park ranger says, we call them gentle giants, and LeVar agrees, gentle giants is exactly what they are. And at the very end, we see one final shot of a manatee kind of swirling around in the water. And LeVar says, when a manatee playfully tumbles through the water, it's a sign he's healthy again. That's when he's ready to return to the wild. And the segment ends right here in My Life with the Wave, but in Sam the Sea Cow, the adventure continues with LeVar actually helping these guys get the manatee back into the wild. And I didn't see that episode until many years later. Alright, My Life with the Wave continues back on Long Beach, New York. He says the ocean is full of many living things that need our care, but beyond the waves, beneath the surface of the warm ocean waters, are the creatures of the coral reef. When I was a kid, I always thought that was the title of this segment, The Creatures of the Coral Reef. Now, this recycled segment, there were a lot of episodes recycling segments from previous episodes in the 1998 season of Reading Rainbow. This one came from the episode Dive to the Coral Reefs, and that one, LeVar actually scuba dived in a coral reef for real, but we don't see LeVar doing it in this episode. What we do see is the segments with Harold Hudson and Paige, who are two scientists who are the reef doctors. They try to take care of corals that got damaged by ships which come too close, similar to how the guys we just saw were helping the manatees. And Harold narrates most of this segment, Harold Hudson, and he and Paige find an elkhorn coral, and they're going to transplant it to a location of the reef that got severely damaged in hopes that lots of other coral will start growing there and become restored over the years. So we see them measuring the coral. It looks like a standard measuring tape, because I assume that would be waterproof. Then we see Paige taking notes on a waterproof pad with a waterproof pencil. It looks like just an ordinary clipboard. I wonder what kind of material that paper is made of, and that pencil too. I would think that the paper would just disintegrate and the whatever lead or graphite is in there would just wash away. Maybe it's some kind of rubber or something, I don't know. And they're chiseling away at the rock to remove the coral. And they say that unless you're a reef doctor doing important work to help the coral, it's best to never touch it when you're diving down into the reef to look at it. Just look and not touch, they say. And they also got a brain coral and a staghorn coral. Coral, not curl. Staghorn coral. So they very carefully hand the delicate corals to a lady who's on a boat, and she puts them into barrels of water. Now they're standing on the boat looking at the corals. And Harold says, "Oh, these are beauties." I always like that term, like, that's a beauty, or what a beauty. I said that a lot when I was a kid. Now in this version, they skipped the parts where they were looking at the other two corals, including the brain. We did in fact see a small snippet of the brain coral examination at the very beginning of this segment as LeVar was talking. But in the Dive to the Coral Reefs version, we see Harold and Paige looking at each of the three corals and talking about them in great detail. But here, they're just talking about the elkhorn that they're showing us the transplant process of. And he explains that the living part of the coral, I keep saying coral, is the thin skin that you see on top. And everything underneath is stone, or like a skeleton, yeah. Next we see the divers going down to this part of the reef that looks very desolate and empty. There's not much growing there. He says the large crater went off course and landed in the shallow water there, completely destroying the coral reef. And they say that, that coral be its first new inhabitant. So they're chiseling away at another rock to make a nice solid foundation there. And they place the coral on top of it. And even as a kid, I noticed that these divers cannot talk to each other when they're underwater because they have these air masks on. And so they just use their hands to communicate. And so Harold kind of puts his hands together like a ball to tell Paige to go up and get some kind of cement to hold the coral together onto this rock. And so then she goes up to get it, and the lady on deck hands it to her. And they say that this cement works very well underwater, but it hardens very quickly, so they gotta get onto that coral pretty quick there. And it's made of a fine powder that sheds easily, they said. And there's like these clouds of powder going everywhere underwater there. Almost looks like smoke. And they press very hard with the coral down onto the cement to get it in place there. And then when they're done, they say now it's up to nature to take its course. In time, this coral will help bring life back to this part of the reef that was lost for centuries. And so that was the Reef Doctor, and I think that was probably the most memorable part of this episode for me when I was a kid. Seeing them go underwater like that looked really cool, and thought, hey, maybe I could do that someday. I'm not a very good swimmer, and I've definitely never kept my head underwater that long, but I do enjoy swimming in the pool, or at least playing in the pool. Alright, it's about time for the book reviews now, and LeVar says, There's only one thing that I enjoy more than relaxing by the surf, and that's relaxing by the surf with one of my favorite books. And then he sits down on a beach chair under an umbrella with a big purple flower pinwheel, and he's holding a book. It looks like some kind of grown-up book. I don't know what book that is. And he says, if you're feeling a wave of affection for some reading perfection, then here are 3 books you might want to enjoy, but you don't have to take my word for it. A wave of affection. That fits perfectly with my life with the wave, because it was a love story between the boy and the wave. A wave of affection for some reading perfection. Alright, so what books do we have this time? First we have a girl named Takia reviewing a book called Water Dance, written and illustrated by Thomas Locker. And this book has lots of lovely illustrations of different forms of water. They show lakes and waterfalls, rain falling from the sky, ocean waves, mountain streams. There's even the moon reflecting off the water in this ocean. Yeah, that's a really amazing looking book. I should check that out sometime, see if the library has it. Next we have another book about water called Our Wet World, reviewed by a boy named Alex. Our Wet World was written by Sneed B. Collard III and illustrated by James M. Needham. So this book looks very similar to Water Dance, but it has a little bit more of an emphasis on not just the places where you see water, but also the creatures that live within the water, like the fish and the turtles and stuff, and alligators. And as the boy talks about this book, he says, water, water, it's everywhere. Wow, that reminds me of the title of one of the Kipper episodes we did back in March. Water, Water Everywhere it was called. It was the one where Kipper and Tiger were playing with the paddling pool in the backyard, and the garden hose went haywire, and it filled up all of Kipper's house with a few feet of water, so the house was flooded. And so they went inside the house, and instead of freaking out or trying to get rid of the water, they went in and played in it until Pig came along to invite them to the pool, and he opened the door and all the water poured out of the house. Gee, doesn't that sound familiar? We should have saved that one for this month, because having that one right alongside reading Rainbow's My Life with the Wave, that would have been perfect. Oh well. And one more book. It's called Here is the Coral Reef, which is very similar to the words that LeVar used at the beginning of the Reef Doctor segment, the creatures of the coral reef, and this one's called Here is the Coral Reef. Also similar to the title of the episode that's the Reef Doctors were originally featured in, Dive to the Coral Reefs. So this book is called Here is the Coral Reef. It was written by Madeline Dunphy and illustrated by Tom Leonard. And as you may have guessed, we see lots of amazing illustrations of the coral reefs, not just the corals, but all the fish and other creatures that live among them. And the reviewer, Jamal Champion, concludes by saying, next time I go to the beach, I'll be thinking of all the amazing creatures under the sea in this book called Here's the Coral Reef. And that's it for the book reviews. Now then, let's see what LeVar has to say in the conclusion of this episode. We're actually getting through this one pretty quick. It's probably going to be a lot less than an hour this time. LeVar says, down where the water breaks is where I cook up some of my best ideas. And he's going to share with us one of his favorite beach recipes. And all you need is a bucket and a shovel. And so first you gotta grab some sand, and as he's digging sand out of the ground, a wave comes by and makes the sand all wet, and it's going all over his feet, which is crazy because at the beginning of this show, he was trying to avoid the waves. He was running away from them. Well, now his feet are getting cold, and I was really surprised that looks like he's wearing sneakers in this. I'll bet they're really wet and soggy and sandy now, because that water's full of sand. Because you would think that waves like that would just wash the sand away. You can clean off your feet in those waves. Not so. It just makes your feet wetter and sandier. I learned that the hard way when I went to the beach the other week. The beach is fun to watch with the waves and everything, but I'm not a big fan of sand or salt water. Now that he's got sand in his bucket, LeVar says, next you go out and grab a piece of wave. And as a wave comes in, he dips his bucket down and grabs a bunch of water. He probably didn't need a whole lot because there was already some water in there to begin with because the sand was really wet as he was scooping it. Then he says, make sure you have a little bit more wave in your bucket than sand. And the rest is a piece of cake. A piece of cake, huh? Well, he was saying that he cooks up some of his best ideas at the beach, and he's sharing with us one of his favorite beach recipes, so it seems kind of fitting that he would mention a piece of cake. But there's no food here. He walks over to a place where he's making a dribble sandcastle. He takes a handful of sand out of the bucket, puts it between his fingers, and then just kind of dribbles it onto this pile so it makes a little bit like kind of like a castle tower. He says not only does it look great, but it feels terrific between your fingers too. For some people, I'm sure it would. For me, it would feel kind of gross, actually. When I was a kid, I looked at this and I thought it looked a little bit like cookie dough. I guess I had a piece of cake on the brain since LeVar had just said it. Like really soft and runny cookie dough. This is really neat. This is actually exactly what they did on Blue's Clues in the episode about building. Shovel and Pail were making dribble sandcastles, and Steve was helping them figure out which tower was taller and how much sand to add to make the towers even. Yeah, I was 2 years old when I saw that episode of Blue's Clues, and now at the age of 3.5, I'm seeing LeVar do it in real life on Reading Rainbow, so that was really cool. Finally, LeVar says, just one word of advice. Try not to build your castle too close to the water's edge. And as he's saying that, another wave comes in and crashes right into LeVar's dribble sandcastle. Doesn't destroy it though, it's not too bad, but LeVar's aware of the danger here, and as he gets splashed by the wave, he laughs and says, or that naughty wave just might come and wash it all away. I'll see you next time. So the tide's coming in, LeVar's getting splashed, and so is the base of his dribble sandcastle, but fortunately he built it high enough, it's like a high pile of sand, all the little dribbly towers on top, so he was able to make that last for as long as this filming session was. And then the sound of the ocean waves abruptly cuts off, and we hear the closing music. Now, when this episode first aired, it had the original 1983 version of the theme song, because this was the final season to use the original version before they changed all of the episodes in 2000 with the updated version. Now, I watched this in 2001, so this was after they had changed it to the updated music. And it's a very short, little 30-second credit roll. It's not a long one like they had in the 80s. And they showed different directors for the Manatee and Reef Doctor segments because they came from different episodes. Now, this episode doesn't have a special thanks to section. Instead, it just says, footage courtesy of Bermuda Department of Tourism. Bermuda, is that California? No, I'm actually way off. Bermuda is an island way out in the Atlantic Ocean. By air, it's 90 minutes from New York and 2 or 3 hours from major U.S. East Coast cities like Atlanta, Boston, Miami, and Philadelphia. So they must have gotten some wave footage from those guys. That montage of waves that we saw in the beginning, they must have got some nice pictures from the Bermuda Department of Tourism. Also says footage provided by Endorphin Productions, Pete Hodson /H30, and Hawaii Public Television. So I wonder if that's where they got the elephant footage from. If they didn't film it themselves, they might have got it from one of those guys. And also, some of the footage of surfers might have come from Hawaii PBS. So yeah, I guess in 98, Reading Rainbow's budget might have been a little bit tight, so they tried to do some really simple episodes by introducing some new books while also recycling lots of footage from previous shows. And then, of course, at the very end, LeVar goes over the books that were featured today. And that's it! That was Reading Rainbow, My Life with the Wave! I keep forgetting how good this episode is. It kind of gets overshadowed by so many others because there's tons of episodes that are like really, really awesome. Now, don't get me wrong, I enjoyed this one too. I like it a lot. I just wouldn't consider it one of my top 10 favorite episodes because for me, there's so many others that rank way higher than this, even as good as this one is. But yeah, I enjoyed it. I'm not a huge beach fan myself. I mean, I'd much rather look at pictures of the beach or watch the ocean waves from a distance than to actually stand on the sand. My latest trip to the Outer Banks was kind of interesting, though. We stayed at a 4x4 beach. We rented a beach house way up in Corova Beach, which is way up north end of Outer Banks towards the Virginia line. It's still in North Carolina, but you have to kind of drive down, go over the bridge, and then drive back up. Because you can't go in from the top at Virginia because there's a fence there. But you gotta drive on the sand. There's like no paved roads there. It's all sand roads. And they have lots of wild horses living up there. And I actually managed to get some really cool footage of those wild horses. Put together a really nice video. If I think of it, I'm going to put a link for that video in the description below when I post this on my YouTube channel. In fact, I might even put it on the Substack as well. But yeah, as a little kid, I always liked water. I liked playing in the bathtub. I like the swimming pool, even though I never learned how to swim properly. And this also reminds me of a few trips that I took over the years to the National Aquarium in Baltimore. Yeah, that's a really fun place. I enjoy going there. They have this huge coral reef with this ramp that goes way down, and then they have sharks in the basement. Yeah, it's one of my favorite places. I enjoy going there. And also, closer to home when I was younger, we have a place here in Lancaster, Pennsylvania called That Fish Place, That Pet Place. It's a massive pet store. It's like a PetSmart or a Petco on steroids, and it's independently owned. And they have this really large fish section, and they had a few cases that had these corals in. I haven't been there in a while. I don't know if they still have that kind of thing or not, but I remember thinking of Reading Rainbow and the coral reefs when I saw that. So yeah, great episode featuring a really fun, really weird book, a really over-the-top fantasy story about a boy and his relationship with an ocean wave. So that's all for that. Like I said before, there will be no Reading Rainbow next month or in August. In September, hopefully the first week of September, if I get stuff made in time, we're going to be looking at one of my all-time favorite episodes of Reading Rainbow, The Sign Painter's Dream. I have a lot to say about that one. I'm really looking forward to talking about that with you guys. That'll be in September 2026, this fall. But you won't have to wait that long for Kipper, because next week we're going to be talking about 3 of my favorite episodes of Kipper the Dog, The Conker Tree, The Goldfish, and Sleepless Night. That'll be next week. Until we meet again, this is Joshua Stauffer signing out. My apologies for taking so long to get another episode made, but I'm back. We're back in business. I'm doing it again. Hope you guys have a wonderful week. I'll be back next week with another fun-filled episode of Kids TV and Me. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time. Kids TV and Me is a fan-made podcast, and it is not affiliated with any of the programs, production companies, or networks mentioned on the show. My primary goal of this podcast is to shine the spotlight on some of the lower stimulation alternatives to traditional children's programming, and to help you make smart decisions about your kids' screen time. If you are enjoying this podcast, don't forget to like and subscribe. And if your podcast provider has a comment section, let me know your thoughts on the topics we've talked about today. To keep the conversation going, you can also leave me a message on Instagram at Joshua Stauffer Creations and on Substack at joshuastauffer1.substack.com, where you can also read my Little Joshua webcomics, my book, Meet Zoe Richards, and now the sequel, Zoe's Friends. Remember to always pay close attention to what your children are watching, and as always, don't be childish, but stay childlike.